Hello, hello. I am Karen Jean-François, and this is the Women in Data podcast. A podcast where every other week I interview some of the most inspiring women working in data. They discuss how data is used in various industries, share their knowledge and experience in the field, and equip you with tips to help you overcome challenges on your career and feel great. Let's get straight to it. Whether it is to go on maternity leave, try something else, or simply recharge your energy battery, there will be a moment in your career when you will want a break. Or maybe you've already had one. Rachel Escott, Senior Director for Enterprise Data and Analytics at FIS, had been working in a senior position at a big consulting firm when she took a career break. She wanted to move to the country, run a small holding, and spend more time with her two young children. And while she gained invaluable skills during that time, coming back to the corporate world after almost 10 years was a daunting prospect. She took on a more junior role in the WorldPay data team, but through a supportive returner program, soon found her feet and realized that all her past skills and experience made her a versatile leader and role model. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Cecilia. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi there.
And we speak with Rachel, who came on the podcast to share her learnings and bring you advice on how to navigate your return to work. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
It's so lovely to have you with us on the podcast today. I am excited about this conversation. Just before we hit record, we had a bit of a laugh, and you were introduced to us by Alex, who is part of our editing team, and I just can't wait to have this conversation with you. But before we get into it, can I invite you to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. And I'm delighted to be here. It's lovely, and I appreciate Alex connecting us together. I'm Rachel Escott. I work as a senior director in the enterprise data analytics team at FIS. We're a team of about 200 individuals who both build out the cloud platform and create products and data analytics from that platform. My role at the moment is focused around managing our vendor relationships with our licenses and our contractor relationships, but I continue to support and I manage individual data analysts.
So I know that your career so far has been so full of adventures and not a very straightforward path, which I love. I love a good story. So we also got some feedback, obviously, from Alex. So I would love you for you to briefly touch on the main chapters, your roles and responsibilities in each of them. And there is something about a farm that I'm really looking forward to share with the listeners.
Yes. So, when I finished university, I did maths at university because I loved maths, and I got to the end of my degree. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had an interview with the Met Office because I thought, being a weather person, that would be interesting. It was a catastrophic interview. I did really badly in it. It was a scary process. So then I thought I'd spent a year of my degree in Denmark and spent quite a lot of time in breweries. And I thought, I fancy the idea of being a master brewer. So I got a place to do a brewing and distilling masters in Edinburgh. But unfortunately, I couldn't get any funding to support me to do that course. So I had to give up.
Oh, that's too bad.
So I ended up applying for a role at Arthur Andersen, the Big Four accounting firm at the time, in a small team who were writing tax software. It's not what you dream of when you're a little girl, is it? But to be honest, I loved that job. We started off in a team of 14 or 15 of us and ended up in a team of 100 people. We were developing software for internal use, and then we started to sell it to clients. I remember the day my boss turned up at my desk with a SQL Server manual, which was about 10 inches thick, and plunked it on my desk and said, "We're going to write our first ever database for the post office." it wasn't Horizon, by the way. It was a piece of I managed their property taxes. But I've been finding that story very interesting to follow, having worked with the post office at that in the late 90s. And my career developed really well there. I moved from developing software into working with clients to look at their holistic processes around how they created tax returns, how they met their commitments. So I did process improvement. We started to build automation where we linked the accounts to the tax system, and that was quite sort of forward thinking at the time in that space. And then we went through the Enron collapse, which with hindsight was maybe exciting. Going through it wasn't much fun. So Arthur Andersen as a business went out of business. We became part of Deloitte. And then I met my husband and I had 2 children, which meant I had 2 maternity leaves. And like many other women, my career kind of stalled over that period. And so when EY came knocking and said, we're setting up a department to do tax automation and process improvement like you've been doing, would you like to come and work with us as a director? I jumped at the chance and took on that role. There were alarm bells that I should have listened to, though. When I had my interview, I didn't get on with the person who was line managing me, and I should have listened to my gut instinct. And that role never turned out to be what it should have been. And by this time, I'm sure many of you have been in similar situations. My children were at nursery 3 days a week. I was working 4 days a week. My husband was also working 4 days a week, which in the early noughties was quite different from most people. But we were running around like headless chickens, trying to drop the children off at nursery, get to school, to work on time, make sure you catch the right trains so that you can get back to nursery before it closes. And life was hectic and difficult. So we made a big decision, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, I think, but to give up that and go and move to the country. And we moved out to Ashford in Kent to a house with an acre of land, and we went on a pig keeping course for a day and learnt to keep pigs, so we thought, and started our little farm. And we got 3 pigs to start with, who we then bred from. We ended up with a flock of 50 chickens. We bred turkeys for Christmas for a while as well. And it was wonderful. And it was amazing for our children to learn the cycle of life and understand that when they're sat down eating a sausage, and they literally used to say, which pig are we eating, when we gave them a plate of sausage. But we had some mother pigs who we knew we would never eat, so they were like the pet ones. And then because you have to be honest with yourselves if you're going into that stuff about how it's going to work.
I have to say, I can relate to that. So my dad has a small farm back home, and he will go, oh, so tomorrow you're going to eat your cousin. And I'm just like, what cousin? And then the cousin is a pig. I was like, oh.
But I have to say, it was the best pork I ever ate was the ones that we reared ourselves. And we knew that those animals had a lovely life and been loved and cared for and were well looked after. And that's sort of, the best meat you can get if you're going to eat meat, I believe, is where you know the welfare of the animals. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a change when you go from, one of the big fours and running around, now that when we think about it, running to catch the right train to go and pick up your kids in nursery, which is not something that actually today we would even consider as much, would we? Or maybe not every day like we did before. Yeah. And just drop everything and move to a farm. And I think it's hard for me. It's heartwarming because, we're not robots. We can't do this all the time. This is not natural. So, having a moment to breathe the fresh air, have pigs and chickens and turkeys for Christmas, it sounds lovely.
It was hard work.
I don't know that. I don't know that. I'm sure, the early mornings to feed the pigs and things like that were not as idyllic as it sounds. But I feel like we already touched this maybe a little bit, but I mean, what was your biggest motivations then to move, to leave the corporate world as a director?
We've talked about the sort of the way our lives were at the time, and I think we had this sort of plan as a family that we would carry on. So my husband and I were both working in different big four firms at the time. We thought we'll work really hard, we'll pay off our mortgage, and then we'll move to the country and have this different life that we like the idea of. And I remember the exact moment I was on a holiday in Northumberland, leaning on a fence with my eldest child, and I thought, I don't want to wait another 2 or 3 years till we've paid off our mortgage. I want to move to the country now. And I turned around to my husband and said, I don't want to wait, let's move now. And he said, I was just thinking the exact same thing. So we decided that we would do it. And I knew that would really mean that we'd be leaving our corporate roles, because the idea of remote working so we're in 2008 now. At this point, I used to occasionally work from home, and that meant I'd copy all my files onto the laptop, and would only be able to work on Excel and Word documents. I couldn't get my emails. I couldn't could just about make a phone call, I think. But, it was really, and so there was no way that work was going to say, yes, you can work from home 3 days a week and just come into London one or something like that. It was not going to happen.
How things have changed.
Yeah, it's transformed. It's huge, and that was actually one of the biggest differences when I came back after that break, was how much the technology had changed to facilitate different ways of working.
And did you think you were going to be away for such a long time? Because it was how long was it at the end that you?
So it was 8 years.
8 years. That's
I was out of the corporate world. No, I had no plan. Look back now and go, what were we thinking of? We had another 6 months after we decided, where it took that time to sell our house, and it was the clash of the end of 2008 and 2009 at the same time as well. So the world changed, but we worked really hard to save. So we stopped spending our corporate salaries, and we saved really hard for 6 months, so that when we first moved, we knew we would have a bit of money. But it soon became clear that we would need to work. We still had a mortgage, because we hadn't paid a mortgage off, and we needed to get jobs and careers in a different way.
And I guess also money to maintain the farm. But
yes, exactly. Because pig breeding was fun, but it wasn't hugely profitable the way we managed to do it. We were never going to make a career of that.
I'm thinking, our stories are so different yet so similar. So when you were talking about, taking on a role where you knew already before even joining that there were some things that were not going to work for you, and then eventually you were unhappy and had to leave. So this is definitely something I've gone through myself as well in the past, so I can relate to that. But then you going and being brave, saying, okay, now it's enough, I need to go, move to the countryside, follow this plan that you had with your family is just incredible. It's so much bravery in there. I love this story. But you also mentioned that you had to go back to do some work because you needed an income to maintain the family, and I guess your lifestyle as well. And I'm guessing that's when you ended up working as a finance and business consultant for schools. How did that come about?
Yes, that's right. So my husband managed to get a job locally working for a bank, but that was a full-time role. So then I was left going, well, I need to do part-time work, because we were happy for our children to be in nursery some of the time, because we always felt that was good for their socialness and, good. But I couldn't look for a full-time job. So I started looking for local part-time jobs. And let me tell you, that was a very demoralising experience. I remember applying for a job to do filing at the local council, and I didn't get an interview. And I asked them for feedback, and they said, your CV didn't show that you could take initiative. And I was like, what, my TV that said I can manage multi-million-pound projects with huge teams of people transforming huge organisations, but it didn't say the word. And so it
clearly wasn't implied.
It was, exactly. It was a lesson in being very explicit on a CV for certain types of jobs. It was hard, but I soon realised that the school space was, a space that would work longer term once my children went to school, and things in terms of hours and in terms of holidays. So I applied for a few jobs, working in sort of school administration side of things, really. And I eventually got a job working as a school secretary in a tiny village school with only 60 children in this beautiful, idyllic place. You get out of your car every morning and a sheep would talk to you as you went into work. And it was a very different world.
It sounds very different, and I really admire that. I feel like you really transported your life in a completely different environment. But can you tell us a bit how different that was really from the corporate world and the work you were doing before?
Yeah. The world of education is very particular, and it's a very insular space. So even a job as a school secretary, most of the adverts will say, we want you to have experience in education, because that's how it's a very closed world. And most of the people in that space have been in education all their life. And so there's lots of sort of norms that feel sensible to them, but felt very alien to me. For example, one of the things, if you applied for a job in another school, firstly, you would tell your current school straight away that you were even thinking about it. And then you would go and visit the other school before you even applied for the job, which, if you think about that compared to how how that sort of stuff works in corporate world, is, it's just a completely opposite way around approaching something. So it was a very different world, and I definitely felt like an outsider, but I also saw that meant I could bring value and difference in a.
Yeah, so very different. I'm guessing this is one of the challenges you've had, but you definitely had to overcome other challenges. Can you talk us a bit through these ones?
Yeah, I mean, working as a school secretary is probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life. Not only did I have to do the finance of the school and the administration and dealing with parents, but I also had to be the caretaker and the cleaner and all of those sort of things. But as in a lot of my other roles, where I got my strength and what helped me was building relationships. So it was about building relationships with the people I was working alongside, understanding their needs and their issues so that I could support them as well as I could, and also building relationships outside the school, so with the local authority and the various stakeholders. And I think that's something that I've taken with me, throughout my career, is that, you're in a new space, build relationships, and that's what will provide you the support to do a good job.
It's such a good skill to have, but also a very difficult one to build. And how did that time impact your personal growth? Because obviously you left, I guess, I don't want to say on a low, but it was a difficult time. And then you completely transformed your life. I'm really keen to understand how that shifted for you.
Yeah, I think because I didn't have a long-term plan to go back to the corporate world necessarily, I never focused too much on whether I was learning the right things, but I think I'm a learner by nature. So I ended up doing a qualification in school business management, a diploma, because that was the area I was working in. That gave me some new skills that I didn't have. And I look back now and I think I learned so much. I learned about procurement. I learned about financing and forecasting. I learned about managing very different stakeholders from the ones that you come across in a corporate world, and also just doing all the things that I do anyway, interacting with people, negotiation, relationships, but in such a different environment, just made those muscles all the stronger and all the better because I used them in a different way, in a way. So, I look back and think I grew a huge amount in that time.
Yeah, I think when you're pushed to somewhere where you haven't been before, you definitely have to learn. I mean, I can absolutely relate to that. Anyone who has heard my story knows that I can relate to that. But and then I understand that after that you went back to, and I put very, very, very big quotes on this, work, corporate world, let's say. So what happened? What triggered it? What triggered that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things going on. Pay in a school is really low. Okay, and pay for administrative staff is even worse. And there does come a point, I did it for 7.5 years, where that becomes, demoralizing, that you're not, my husband's in the corporate environment earning, nearly 10 times what I was earning. And I knew that I was as good as him. And that was one piece. I think I got quite bored. I could do the work I was doing. I got the skills. I built up the knowledge of the education environment, and so it was easy. So I wasn't being stretched, and I was lonely. I missed interacting with other people who had the same sort of intellectual interests and challenges that I had when I was in the corporate world. And in education, teachers, they're brilliant, lovely people, but they care about teaching, and it's quite a narrow sort of space. And I wasn't getting the intellectual stimulation that I wanted and needed.
No, I understand, and I for having people that work in the education sector, there are teachers in my family. I fully am with you with the unfair state of salaries or anything like that. But that's unfortunately it's a bigger problem. But so what happened then? Because you haven't really worked in data. You did maths, and you've worked in the consulting world. So what happened? Why did you go into data?
Yeah, I think it was partly luck, to be honest. That the World Pay returners program session that I went to, they had sort of 3 different areas of their business that were looking to recruit people through that process, and one of them was data. And I went over and started chatting to the data people. And World Pay is a payments processor. It processes all of the payments for Tesco's, for example. Imagine the data that's there. And I immediately was like, oh, you could do this and you could do this. And I could immediately see that there was a really exciting space to play in. And the reality is, I've been working with numbers, tax numbers and accounting numbers in the past, but that's all data too. And, I knew how to code in SQL Server, in SQL, because I'd done that. I'd built SQL things. So I knew that I had the fundamental basics of the technology, even if it was, I hadn't used it for 8 years. But I just thought, goodness me, this is an exciting space, and I just want to go play in it.
It's a very exciting space, I believe.
I mean, the reality, not always as exciting, but we're all data people. There's a lot to be excited about, isn't there?
I have to say that I have not fully seen the type of data WorldPay gets, but knowing the amount of transactions that goes through your terminals, being in stores, online, all these things, it has to be insane. And transaction data is my favorite type of data. So I can relate to the excitement and all these things and the fun that comes with it.
This is definitely directed for data people.
Yeah, we're on a data podcast. We're all excited, so we can geek out together.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking,
love it.
You can see everywhere where people are spending. How cool is that? Sorry, that's like stalker level type of thing.
But this is, we'll have a different conversation about that one day.
There is GDPR. There is GDPR. Yeah. We are not looking at what people are spending at. Not at all.
No.
But so I'm guessing, yes, that was fun. You did touch on the returner program. And I'm guessing, coming back to the corporate world after almost 10 years being out and doing something different must have been so difficult. Can you talk us through these, the steps you took, the challenges you faced, and how you overcame them?
Yeah. So the first thing really for me, when I started thinking, I think this is what I want, was how much that was going to impact my family. And I actually sought out some counselling to sort of work through that I was making the right decision for myself, but then also to support how I might approach, getting my family on board with the idea, because it meant changes for my husband, it meant changes for my children. It wasn't just a change for me. And once the family were on board, then my husband's first question was, well, what are you going to do and where are you going to do it? I was like, I don't know. I knew I wanted to be in London. I'd got that piece sorted out. But then it felt hugely daunting. I was like, I don't know where to start with, what type of job I could do. So many employees. And it was a friend who I used to work with who'd returned a couple of years before me. And she said, have you heard of returner programs? Did you know such a thing existed? And I was like, but I haven't been on a career break. I've been working really hard for the last 10 years.
Yes,
and
you have.
She looked at me and went, yeah. And my husband went, oh, yeah, no one cares about that. Don't even bother to put it on your CV. And I was like, I've worked so hard. That's not fair. But it's fine. And I got over that. And it was the gift for me. It was the safety net I needed, because I knew if I took a role that came through a returner program, they already understood that I was making a big change, that it was an impact on my family, that I wasn't going to know everything straight away, and they would have different expectations. And that's what I needed, the sort of comfort that I would have some support. And then obviously there was a lot less jobs to look for, so that was much less overwhelming. So yeah, that's I came and I went to a session at one of the big American banks first, which was a really great session. They had a brilliant comedian come and talked. But I came away going, well, I don't want to work for a big American bank, so at least I know that now. And then I went to the well-paid one, and I talked to the data stand, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And I really feel that I can add value in that space. And that's what I want to be.
I love that you went, met them, and you was thinking, yes, this is my space. And once you got there, tell me how did that work out? How did you feel? Because yes, you've worked before, but you did mention it was very different. And I'm so sorry that people felt like your experience was not valuable enough to be put on your CV. Well, not valuable enough, but it was not aligned enough to be put on the CV. I'm guessing this created a lot of, I'm going to use a word I will not know how to pronounce. I'm guessing this created a lot of internal turmoil, or yeah.
Yeah. It was very good. Yeah. I had to sort of let go of that a little bit and go, okay, it's done. And yeah, I think I took a more junior role. So, I'd been a director at EY. I came in at a senior analyst level, which was sort of, 4 or 5 years experience type level. And partly I was okay with that, because I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know if it was going to work for my family. I didn't know if it was going to work for me. I didn't know if I could do it. And that was the role that they offered me. So I was happy to accept that. And I think the first challenge was that then my peers were millennials. Now, I'd not really worked with millennials at all, because I've been gone from the workplace for 8 years, when they'd all started working. And their approach to work was so different from the sort of, when I joined Arthur Andersen, everyone expected to get promoted every year and eventually make partner. And, that was, and it was all about how many hours do you put in, who do you impress? And I loved working with millennials, their whole attitude to work and life and their expectations of being able to enjoy their job and all of those things. I found it so refreshing. And do you know what? I was so welcomed by them. although I was worried that I would feel like an outsider, they never made me feel like an outsider. They welcomed me with open arms. They didn't care that I was an old lady. and it was lovely. I do remember, I have to tell you this story. We went out for a drink the first night, and so I went to the bar, and so this is 2017, and I got out some cash to pay at the bar, and they all turned around and went, "What you got cash for?" And by the way, you work for a payments industry, so you shouldn't be paying for anything with cash. I was like, okay, mine. And I never got out cash in a London pub again.
Well, now the problem is sorted. They will not accept the payment by cash anyways.
No, exactly. So it was good. It was good prep for the real, for what was coming. But I remember feeling really stupid and really out of touch that that I dared to try and pay for a pint with £10 note.
But the little things you learn with the millennials.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really, it's reassuring that you actually found your space after all of this. Well, like Karen said, all of this turmoil and these changes in your career. But now that you have a bit of distance to it, is there anything you wish you'd known before leaving the corporate world and before returning that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think if I'd had more of a plan and thought that probably I would want to end up back in the corporate world, then I might have kept up some of my relationships a bit better. I did keep a few, and in fact, a lot of the people I used to work with in Deloitte still all work together, and I do have contacts in that space. But I think I might have made more effort to keep something going in those spaces, so that actually there might have been other options for me coming back as a returner. So I think that would be one thing that I would like to have done. I think when it comes to coming back, there's quite a lot of messages that say don't come back in a junior role, don't do yourself down. And I reflect on my experience, and whilst salary wise, I've never got up to where I feel is the right salary level because I came in at that lower level. So I've had the promotions, but I think I've been left behind financially. Mm-hmm. But actually, that's not my biggest motivation. And if I did it all again, would I do it the same way? I think I would, because actually that being a peer with those millennials was transformational for me as someone who now manages, Gen Z and all those things. I think that was a really important part of my growth and development work. And do you know what? I loved being hands-on and getting down and dirty and doing programming again, which I hadn't done for years. And I look back really fondly on those early days when I came back to work. And I literally remember getting to the security gates downstairs and swiping my pass going, "Yay, I'm at work!" And, we don't have that very often in our lives, I don't think. That you're enjoying your work that much. So I wouldn't change that for the world. And I think, like all these things, it's about you as a person, what's important to you. So it's absolutely right for some people to fight to come back in a senior role, but it's not right for everybody. And I don't think one fits all.
I think this story about taking a more junior role is. It's such a big topic, and we've touched on so many big topics in this episode. It's incredible because I'm thinking, you went out for a few years and then came back, but there are also people like Cecilia who transitioned into a different career, or even within data. So I started out as a data scientist, moved into data analytics, moved into management, and now, looking at the different roles you have around now, you're having the analytics product manager kind of role, and all of these have different types of pay ranges, and it feels like if you want to move from one to another, there is always this thought in the back of the mind of, yes, but am I taking a salary cut? Obviously, if you move up, you're not getting the salary cut, but if you move sideways, let's say, then that sideways move, even if it's on the same level, it could be a salary cut because it's not hands-on technical. You're not coding Python. You're not doing all these kind of things. And then the salary suddenly drops. And these questions of, I know myself, I have this feeling of, am I don't know, causing the gender pay gap by doing these kind of things. And it's so stressful.
Yeah. It's very difficult, isn't it? And I think everyone has different relationships with financial reward, and they're differently important to them. But for me, I look back and my enjoyment of roles and things is not actually related to how well I was paid. And that, the best paid job I've ever had was that one at EY that I should never have taken because I didn't enjoy it, didn't like the people I worked with, the environment was wrong, the role was wrong. I went because they offered me loads of money and it was really tempting.
I can absolutely relate to that. I mean, when I left hospitality, that was exactly what happened. I had a very high paying job. I was miserable. So, it's also what is the most important thing. And most of the time, it's not really the money. It's nice, but it's not all of it. Sorry, just pause here for a second. Do we want to continue with the 3 advices or should we move on?
I think
because otherwise it's going to be a bit too long.
I think let's do the 3 advice and then move to the what you're learning.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, Rachel, tell me, what would be your top 3 advices for someone who is, coming back to the corporate world?
So I think the first piece is you've got to believe yourself that you can add value. And you've got to understand that whatever you've done, whatever your journey's been, you're going to have been picking up skills and experiences that are going to help you in any environment, but definitely in the corporate environment. So you've got to have that belief, because if you don't believe, no one else will. And I've found that having a couple of really good friends who were about to remind me of that too, when I had doubting moments, and for them to say, you can add value, don't be scared, is really important. So that's my number 1. Number 2, I'm going to go back to relationships. So investing in meeting people. You're starting in a new organization. It's you've had a huge change probably to get there. Go out and meet people. Take any opportunity you have that you bump into someone and you have a couple of words and you think, you sound interesting. Can we have a cup of coffee together? I want to hear your story. I might tell you my story. Don't call it networking. Don't think of it as networking, because we all hate networking. It's just having a chat with someone over a cup of tea. That's a pleasurable experience. And that's how you learn about the business, more broadly. So it's finding those connection points and making the most of them, following them up, going, okay, I've met you on a training course. Mm-hmm. Can we meet again and get to know each other a bit better? And then my last one, I would say, is what I found. There was some change that I thought was needed in the team that I joined, some of their ways of working, but obviously I was very much an outsider. So rather than coming in and going, you're doing this wrong, you should do it this way, I tried to model the behaviours that I thought would be better. And that was really successful in slowly driving cultural change in the teams. People saw the success of how I was behaving, and it did change the way that others worked.
I love this last one, because it really is about, you had been working for longer than your peers, and you had seen things differently. So you had this knowledge, but rather than telling them you're doing this wrong, you have to do it this way, it was really showing how things work. This is such a great advice. And believing in yourself as well. As you said, if you don't believe in yourself, then no one else will. And the last one was on the networking. Me and Cecilia had a bit of a conversation on the podcast on networking. So if anyone has missed this episode, do go back and see it. I think it was episode 106 on networking at the end of April. But so loads of learning happening, and it sounds like you are someone that will always be learning and looking for new opportunities and how to do things differently. So I'm really curious to hear about what you're learning at the moment.
Yeah, so actually, I'm currently doing a coaching qualification. So as part of the returner program with WorldPay, I was given an executive coach to support my transition into the role, and that I found that hugely beneficial. I invested a lot into that relationship and got a huge amount back out of it. And I've tried to be a good mentor and role model as I've progressed up through the organisation, and so when I was thinking about what's next for me in terms of growth and development, the idea of coaching was hugely appealing. So I'm sort of picking up more technical knowledge and understanding in that space to really hone my skills and make the most use, and then be able to do what I love most, which is help other people develop and become the best that they can be.
I love that. And that's also linking a bit to your experience working in a school as well, because that's definitely around the education and helping people.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I had the best time, and I love having a laugh with my guests. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for listening to the Women in Data podcast. We will be back in a couple of weeks with a new guest. Until then, if you have 2 minutes, it would be great if you could leave us a rating or a review, as it helps not only to make the podcast more visible, but also to enhance the content. If you don't want to miss the next episode, follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We are also on LinkedIn. And if you wish to, you can even register to the community for free. All you have to do is head to womenindata.co.uk. Have a great day.